Welcome back. Well, it's a condition that affects 1 in 100 Australians, and while many of us know someone with autism, there are still many misconceptions. And it's not just those living with the condition who are affected. It can also, of course, be challenging for their families and for carers. And for today's agenda, I'm joined by mother Jo Abi from 9 Honey and Vicki Gibbs from Autism Spectrum Australia. Good morning and welcome to you both.
Morning.
Vicki, I'm going to begin with you. What is autism?
Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and what that means is that it's a brain-based disorder. So children are born with differences in their brain, and that affects them in two main areas of their development. So firstly, it affects their social interaction, their social skills, their ability to relate to other people, to understand social conventions, to make and maintain relationships. And it also affects them in terms of what we call restricted or repetitive behaviours.
We often hear the phrase, they're on the spectrum. Just explain what that means, and also where does Asperger's fit in with autism?
Yeah, so up until 2013, we had different diagnoses for people who we considered to be on the spectrum. And Asperger's was one of those. We had autistic disorder, Asperger's, and a third group. But we did a lot of research over the years, and we discovered that, in fact, these weren't distinct conditions. It was all one continuum, ranging from children with milder forms of autism and children with more severe forms of autism. So now we refer to everyone as having autism spectrum disorder.
I see. So we're phasing out the term Asperger's, are we?
Yes, so someone who would have been diagnosed with Asperger's would now be diagnosed as having an autism spectrum disorder.
All right. Jo, your beautiful son, Giovanni, was diagnosed with autism at the age of...
7.
OK.
Very late.
Explain what led to that diagnosis. What sort of behaviour had you picked up on?
I knew from the age of around 2.5 that he was on the spectrum, and everyone kept saying, no, he's fine, and sort of feeling like they needed to reassure me. But he was just different from the very beginning. So he would play. He'd play with me, but he would be mimicking behaviours. We'd play peekaboo, and he'd do it to see my reaction, but wouldn't enjoy it himself. He was very quiet. He had the repetitive behaviours. As he got older, and particularly when he started school, it was such a struggle for him. We'd go to the shops and he'd start running. I didn't know why. It was because he had sensory processing issues with the brightness and the noise. He couldn't stand loud noises. So when I finally did have him diagnosed, you know, it explained a lot.
And why do you think a lot of parents might not want to get that diagnosis?
Because of the stigma, because you don't want to have a child with autism. But what I say to those parents and actually beg them to do is get the diagnosis, even if you have a suspicion, because they may not be, but if they are, it doesn't change who they are. Even if you avoid getting a diagnosis, it doesn't make them not autistic. It just means you know what they need and you can get the services that you need for them. It helps them.
And Vicki, early intervention is key, isn't it, when it comes to autism? And it affects more boys than girls, by the way, too, doesn't it?
Yeah, so currently it's about 4 times more boys than girls that are diagnosed, and certainly early intervention has been shown to be really important.
Yeah. And what can you do once you have that diagnosis? Because there's no cure as such. But what can you do to support them?
Yeah, look, so there are a lot of services that are available. So most children who are on the autism spectrum will be getting speech therapy, occupational therapy. There are early intervention programs that are specifically for children on the spectrum that focus on social skills development. Older children will be potentially in specialised educational programs. They may be in social skills groups, and as they get older, we have programs for adults to help them find jobs and to form relationships around dating and services. So right through the ages and stages, there are services and programs. But I think it's really important to say that we can't just work with people on the spectrum, their difficulties. We have to look at the broader community, and certainly my organisation Aspect is more and more working with organisations like the Zoo, Australian Museum, Surf Life Saving Australia, so that we can educate the community to make life easier for people on the spectrum in those settings.
And Jo, I know you are so passionate about removing the stigma attached to autism, and I know you and I have talked often about how, just for example, you know, we can actually celebrate and take advantage of these beautiful individuals.
Exactly, because autism has always been, and some of the most amazing minds were on the spectrum, and there's advantages, there's special skills, there's incredible relationships between parents and their children. Yes, it's hard because of the way society is set up, but I really want Giovanni to have the best life possible. I want to see what gifts he has and really help him to find his place in the world, but I need the world to meet him halfway. I can give Giovanni all the treatments and occupational therapy in the world, but if the world treats treats him like he's disabled and different, then he's never going to find his place.
Yeah, and as you say, some of the most brilliant people in the world
yeah.
are autistic,
I
and they
mean,
have that ability to zone in on one particular issue.
Focus. Yeah, Giovanni can do advanced algebra, but he cannot figure out whether to put his undies on or brush his teeth first. Every morning he asks me, Mum, what do I do first? And that's just the dyspraxia part of autism, where he sort of messes up the instructions and the order. But he can do advanced algebra. I mean, so I really just need to find his gift, as I do with all my children, and make sure he finds a job that pleases him and takes advantage of that.
He's going to have an interesting life, that
Giovanni.
That's
interesting's the word.
Thank you for educating us, Vicki, this morning. It's really wonderful to have you in. Thank you so much. Over to you, Carl.
We don't normally do this either, but I just for a second want to take time to acknowledge the work that Jo Abi does on 9 Honey. She's an extraordinary woman. And she obviously has faced many battles, but she is an extraordinary woman in what she tries to achieve across many facets of her life. And I just wanted to stand here today, or sit here today, and show our appreciation for what you do, Jo.
Yeah,
You're outstanding.
Well said.
She articulates it all so very well, doesn't she?